Yeah, I mean, if you had just substituted the word black for white and any other person had said what she did and just said black instead of white, they would have been fired in 24 hours. She knew
Hmm.
that too. So I remember though, you remember Megan when she first got on, she had this whole paper trail of being a homophobe. Do you remember that? And then she
Yes.
said, I'm going to get the FBI to investigate because I was hacked. And then she completely lied on the air. She was never hacked. And then she said she may not have been hacked, but she couldn't. Then she said she was almost as if she was in a suspended state of animation. I may have written this, but I don't remember ever saying
Right.
this. And it was so
Doesn't sound
pathetic. And
like
she would
me.
have been, yeah, she should have been fired for that. And then she had a big rant once, I remember, where she was mad that so-called white women had cornrows and this was cultural appropriation and she was going to wear authentic black hairstyles. And then all of a sudden she started wearing blonde. She dyed her hair blonde and straightened it.
She
I
looked like
thought,
Trump.
wow. Yeah. And I thought, wow, you're culturally, why do you want to look like an Anglo-Saxon after you gave a lecture
Right.
that nobody
Why
should
can't I
culturally,
wear the cornrows or have my
yeah,
daughter get cornrows in the Bahamas on a trip? But she can take my hair. She can try to imitate my hair.
yes.
No problem whatsoever.
So all I'm saying is that she was a sad person. Had a horrible, I'm not trying to psychoanalyze her, but she was terribly insecure. And it came out, it just exuded from her insecurity, insecurity, insecurity. And she was thrashing around. And it was really the problem of the management to put her out there. They should have yanked her from the very beginning. And that Ellie Mustel, he was an outright racist. I remember he said right after COVID, uh, I got used to not seeing white people anymore, and it was a good feeling. And he
Yeah.
just said things that were, I mean, they were horribly racist, and they kept spouting that filth, and it was horrible. And nobody ever said anything. And then finally, her ratings had stayed. If I don't think they were ever great, but the only reason they took them off is that people got sick of her after the election. But or they would have kept her on. They were never bothered by what she said. They were just trying to adjudicate whether it was good enough to justify the advertisers. I don't know.
So they replaced her with three other hosts. Two of whom are black, one of whom is Hispanic. And I guess they think that will save them. We'll see. They fired everybody. Her entire staff has been laid off, which apparently they found out about the cancellation from the trade mags or from from the internet, same as the rest of us. Classic NBC move. They're such a classy group over there. But it is true that among the dumbest people over at MSNBC, she appears to have been the dumbest and the worst rated. We just pulled the ratings from Thursday night. On Thursday night, this is in the 25 to 54 demo. I mean, this is just unbelievable. Like truly, when I was at Fox, a bad night in the demo would be in the threes, 300 and change, but it was often 600,000, 700,000 and change in the demo. Those are now the overall numbers, the total audience numbers on a great number for most of cable news. Here's her demo number from Thursday night, 59,000. She was
Wow.
4,000 away from Slashies, which is, 9,000, which is 50,000. She was 59,000. That's what she got in the overall demo. She lost to her competitor on CNN, who had 104,000, lost to Laura Ingraham, who had 389,000, lost the whole ratings race inside MSNBC, where their great white hope, Jen Psaki, who's taking over now at 9. This is all part of a reshuffling. She got 65,000 in the key demo. 65. That's okay. That's their future. Rachel Maddow, she's their big star for $30 million a year. All you have to pull is 144,000 in the demo, which I think is what we got. Like maybe overnight at 3 a.m. during a weekend program lineup at Fox. 144,000 now earns you $30 million a year on MSNBC. And then the next lowest, after Reid and Psaki was Stephanie Rule with 88,000. Lawrence O'Donnell got 103,000. These are all terrible, terrible, terrible numbers. And that's one of the many reasons Joy Reid is out, because she was not only a racist, it was very obvious and incredibly alienating, but she didn't rate, Victor. And I think she lasted longer than she otherwise would have, given the fact that she constantly played the race card.
Yeah, and one of the reasons they lost the election, there were many, but one of the reasons is that they were so anachronistic. They looked at these legacy media, NBC, ABC, CBS, PBS, NPR, LA Times, Tribune, Washington Post, New York, and they thought that because 60 Minutes, they thought that these were back in the 1960s or 70s with these huge ratings, and then they didn't realize that, Joe Rogan, your show, all these podcasters, all this Fox is doing well. Newsmax had bigger than some of these people. And then there were online influence. There was a whole new media, and you think that these hip people from Silicon Valley who were left wing would have told them, or somebody, but they were very out of date, old fuddy duddies, and they kept sending. They had an opportunity with Joe Biden at the Super Bowl. They had an opportunity with Kamala Harris to go on Joe Rogan. And they just were so either out of it, and they didn't understand that the whole media world had changed, or they were afraid because they were not these sympathetic, obsequious, left-wing legacy interviewers, or they had to pay them like Oprah or Cardi B or somebody. But whatever it was, they didn't understand the new media at all.
Yeah, and we'll see whether, she's probably going to come over into the digital lane. We'll see whether she has any followings. So far, like Tiffany Cross, who also had this type of a program on MSNBC, which is just all about her hatred for whites, she decided to go independent. She's been an abject failure. Don Lemon's podcast, abject failure. So we'll see how she does. Here is just a couple of bits of background on her anti-LGBTQ past. Between 2007, Variety provided this good recap. In 2009, she blogged about then Florida Governor Charlie Crist, referring to him as Miss Charlie, tagging the post's gay politicians, suggesting that gay men prey on young men in a way that many people consider to be immoral. She said she was repulsed by the film Brokeback Mountain and said, "Does that make me homophobic? Probably." In a 2018 statement, she claimed that the posts were fabricated by an unknown external party who'd gained access to her blog. She said she'd hired a cybersecurity expert. I remember this. This is so fun. She later conceded no evidence of hacking had been found. She issued a blanket apology noting, quote, "I genuinely do not believe I wrote those hateful things because they are completely alien to me. But I can definitely understand, based on things I have tweeted and have written in the past, why some people don't believe me. Also that because we have brains and we know no one jumped on your blog to write a bunch of homophobic stuff and nothing else and then got off." Yeah. And then she claimed there was a fake FBI investigation.
If you have someone like that is so egregious and just flat out lies, and then you keep her there, then that tells her, I can do anything on the air. I can say anything outrageous because I have done the most outrageous thing in the world, and they kept me here, and they knew that. And after that, they had no control over her because she always felt she could play the race card because she had. And the same thing with her guests. And I think
here's hold my thought for one second, because we have a little bit more, because the other thing that kept her on the air was her serious case of TDS. She's a massive Trump hater. They all are on MS, but my God, this woman's unhinged. A few examples.
We've laid out the stakes in this crucial election, where one side stands for freedom while the other meets the textbook definition of fascism, namely a far-right dictatorial regime like Hitler's Germany.
We still don't know for sure whether Donald Trump was hit by a bullet.
For me, there is something wonderfully poetic. The first person to actually criminally prosecute Donald Trump is a black Harvard grad, and a black woman is doing that same exact thing in Georgia. Donald Trump is being held to account by the very multicultural, multiracial democracy that he's trying to dismantle. Go DEI. My DEIs are bringing it home. What he's telling his voters, his black Haitians are violent cannibals. Black people are the enemy. Black people are going to be responsible if and when I lose, and you are permitted through my language to do violence to them.
That was her interpretation of Springfield. It's crazy.
She's not very bright, because you can make the argument that the 23 to 26% of black males that voted for Donald Trump might have made the difference in places like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and Milwaukee and Detroit that put him over the top on the Electoral College. He almost split the Hispanic vote, and he got a record number of Jewish voters. So when she said that about black people are going to make the difference, yeah, they did make the difference in getting them elected. And he kept pretty steady with white males, his base. He didn't lose any, but where he got that extra million and a half were from minorities. And the reason is that they don't listen to people like her anymore. An increasing number at least don't. They look at things like energy prices and inflation, and they don't like to hear all that because, where I am at the Hoover Institution, when I used to talk to Tom Sowell or Shelby Steele or Chiron Skinner, it was almost as if that you didn't even realize what color you were. It was just on the strength of an idea that you assess people, and they welcome that. And a lot of African Americans do, and I think an increasing number do. And then she comes in, and because she's not very well versed and she's not very bright, then she has to play the race card, and then people who are very accomplished don't want to have anything to do with her. And because she pollutes the whole racial dialogue. She's done a lot of damage is what I'm trying to say, Megan.
Yeah.
She's not just an entertainer. She's a hate monger, and she's done a lot of damage, and she's brought a lot of people who are angry at her, and she brought it on herself.
Totally. I have
People
zero
like
sympathy
her
for her.
and
People say like, oh, you
Yeah.
shouldn't celebrate when somebody loses their job. Well, who says I can't? I am celebrating. She deserves it. She never should have been on there to begin with. She's talentless. No. Honestly, she makes her talent, so-called talent, is being a racist on TV. That's her talent. She'll say the most incendiary, nasty things possible about whites and blacks who are conservative. That's the main criterion. If you're white, doesn't matter your politics stripes, she doesn't like you. If you're a black person who's conservative, she hates you even more than she hates the whites. Clarence Thomas is one. I mean, anybody who pipes up as a black conservative is the enemy to Joy Reid. We checked in just to see if, has she changed at all? What happened on her most episode? So we went to Friday just to pull a clip and take a look at this one. This is Wajahat Ali, who is also a terrible person, who was part of that infamous panel with Don Lemon about the Republicans and their maps and they're so stupid. Yeah. So here he is now, this time with Joy Reid in what would maybe be her ultimate or penultimate show.
Every community has what I call their chickens for Colonel Sanders. So what I want to tell the Byron Donalds, and every community's got a Donald. I got a Cash Patel. We got a Nimrata, but we got the Haley. We all got them. All right. What I want to say is this. They'll never love you. They'll never love you. No matter what you do, they'll never love you. You can never wipe out that brown or black skin.
She's shaking her head up and down as he's saying it. You can't be a Republican if you're Byron Donalds, Victor. They'll never love you. They all secretly hate you. You are, as he put it, a chicken for Colonel Sanders.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons they lost, that iconic moment when Barack Obama started dressing down those staffers. Remember, for Kamala Harris, those black, young, really idealistic people, and they were working for her, and he came over and said, basically said to them, you're suffering from Marxist false consciousness. You don't know that you're supporting sexist and racist, but I have to tell you that because I'm morally superior and intellectually superior, and I've got to tell you what you're doing because you're too stupid to find out. And that condescending attitude was why people that were sort of on the grassroots in popular culture, some of the rappers, people like Stephen Smith, Charlemagne the God, not that they were for Trump, but they got so sick of all these elite African-American, bi-coastal elite, which they played the same role, Megan, to the African-American male community that white liberals on the coast and the media universities do to the working class people of East Palestine, Ohio. It's that condescending, we're ashamed of you idea. You're of our same race, but we're ashamed of you. And that gave a lot of latitude for Donald Trump. What he was basically saying is all you people who are poor whites or middle-class blacks or poor middle-class Hispanics, you all have more in common with each other than you do with these people. And he was able to, he didn't get a majority, but he was really able to make inroads in that. And it was a shared class anger and repulsion at elites of each of these groups. And what it did is, under Trump really was a maestro at it. He was able to tell these people, if you're a white truck driver, if you're a black carpenter, if you're a Hispanic contractor, you have more in common, you guys, with each other. And that iconic moment, again, at that McDonald's, when the guy from India and his wife were there, and he said, I'm just an ordinary person. And Trump said, you're not ordinary. That was right off the cuff. And then his wife said, you took a bullet for us. And he said, I guess I did. And those moments were really they resonated throughout the campaign. And these people kept trying to play this 1960s, Black Panther almost line. And no, everybody was sick of it. They were completely sick of it. And I hope that they keep doing it, because I guess Mark Penn came out this week with polls that show that the Democratic, everybody was saying that the Trump honeymoon would end very quickly, and he's doing such controversial things, and maybe he slipped a point or two, but you look at the Democratic polls and they're not getting any better. Whatever they're doing is not working.
I mean, James Carville just gave an interview to Dan Abrams saying that just be quiet, because the Trump White House is imploding and it'll be over. I think he said in 6 weeks or 30 days to 6 weeks, it'll be over. They're just imploding. Then drops a Harvard Harris poll today showing Donald Trump approval rating 52%, disapproval 43. Well, it doesn't feel like it's imploding, but okay, we'll wait, James. No. That was a rare, hard miss from James.
And that's
Carville.
A really good point you're about James Carville, because he was always posed as the authentic voice of the working man Democrat, but he had become just like the bicoastal elite. And you could really see the other day when Stephen Smith said something about politics, and he just went into a profanity-ridden thing. You don't know anything about politics. You're an ESPN sports announcer. You don't know any, and it sounded like a professor. It sounded like a media grandee that was dressing down somebody. And here was this so-called white working class voice of the Clinton years acting like an elite, talking to this black man and saying, you don't know your rear end from a hole in the ground, and started lecturing him. And they can't help it. And that's who they are now. They're a condescending, out of touch elite. And they think that the more heat, the more profanity, the more screaming, the more threats, the more light they're going to get. And it's not working. And we'll see what happens in the midterms, but this is their strategy of demonizing. It's not.
And I think he said 30 days, so we'll see. Okay, we'll look 30 days from today to see whether Trump is still president and whether he still has a White House that's operational and making important decisions. To stay on the subject of Joy Reid and Trump, he tweeted out or truthed out his thoughts. Low-life chairman of Comcast, Brian Roberts, has finally gotten the nerve up to fire one of the least talented people in television, the mentally obnoxious racist Joy Reid. Also thrown out, this is news too, was Alex Wagner, the sub on the seriously failing Rachel Maddow show. Rachel rarely shows up because she knows there's nobody watching. Not wrong there. Then there's, of course, the low IQ con man Al Sharpton. What is he doing to Brian Roberts to stay on the air? He did not get fired. Nothing more than an illegal arm of the Democratic Party, meaning MSNBC. Fake news is an unpardonable sin. So here is a little reaction from the left. That was obviously from the right. Here is former MSNBC anchor Keith Olbermann with quite the take.
Melissa Harris Perry, Tiffany Cross, Joy Reid, Alex Wagner, 4 women. What did they have in common? Well, let's see. They all had their own shows, solo hosts on MSNBC, and they were all women of color, and they've all been fired. Michael Steele is a man of color, and Simone Sanders is a woman of color, and Alicia Menendez is a woman of color. Yeah, they are official. They are safe. Abby Phillip goes out there and gets tortured by this racist Scott Jennings. It's his show, and it's a bunch of people talking about how much of a racist he is, and he leans back in the chair and rocks back and forth and mugs to the camera and creates viral clips. And somebody at MSNBC said, wouldn't we rather have that than Joy Reid, who's now bald, appearing on television every night at 7 o'clock?
Whoa.
They can't help it.
The first point there, Victor, he's not wrong that they've replaced this incendiary woman with, 2 people. Michael Steele can obviously be offensive and say offensive things. Simone Sanders, more so these days, she used to be more reasonable. Now she's gotten harder left, but he's not wrong that there's a shift happening there. Because this just in, 3 more people fired at MSNBC. This is from the New York Post. The new president there continued to overhaul the embattled network, canceling shows. So maybe they're not fired. We're not sure, but their shows are canceled by left-wing anchors Ayman Mohyeldin, Katie Fang, and Jonathan Capehart. Ayman, I don't know I don't want to presume based on his name, but I do think he's Muslim. Katie Fang is an Asian woman, and Jonathan Capehart is a black man who wrote for the Washington Post and he's the only person. I mean, he was like hard leaning into hands up, don't shoot. And as I recall, he was the only person to ever acknowledge that turned out to be wrong. I'm sorry. So I give him points for that, but he is hardcore leftist woke. Here he was just the other week doing that DNC roundtable before they voted on their new president. Everybody had to say if they were non-binary because they needed to get their non-binary numbers up. And this was Jonathan Capehart, really drilling down to what was most important in the next leader of the DNC. Watch.
How many of you believe that racism and misogyny played a role in Vice President Harris's defeat?
All hands up.
Okay. So that's good. You all pass.
Okay. So he's now gone. He lost his show. And here's just a little background on what Mohyeddin did the weekend of October 7th. This is via National Review. He said that Hamas terrorism is ultimately the end result of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ignoring Palestinians, adding that the attacks are very deadly consequences of failed policies. So that's him. Katie Fang, I don't know what her sin was other than terrible ratings. But MSNBC is gleaning something, Victor, and that something is not a positive sign for them.
No, they were unhinged before George Floyd, but somewhere between Me Too, 2018-19, and George Floyd after that, they really did miscalculate. They thought that the country, because of their hatred of Donald Trump, and then especially the George Floyd riots, and then the election of Joe Biden, they thought that this was a new frontier, and that Joe Biden, we were into a revolutionary period, and Biden was this useful waxen effigy for all of these Obama people, and they were going to have this radical agenda, and these people at MSNBC, and to a lesser extent CNN, were going to ride this wave and propel it, and they could say anything they want. The blinders were off, the muzzles were off. They could say, do anything, and they really did. And they didn't realize the mood of the country, where it was. We were in the middle of a counter-revolution because people were sick of an open border and the whole transgendered stuff and the crime and the foreign policy in Afghanistan. And the more that they just kept doubling down, the more there were signs there that the lawfare or getting Trump off the ballot or the Mar-a-Lago raid, they were triumphing that, the more that they didn't understand that was getting people angry. And so they were doubling down rather than being introspective and saying, oh my gosh, I don't think that we're quite in a hard left revolution that everybody's supporting, and I think we're starting to get resistance. They could have said, let's try to be a little bit more analytical. Instead, they said, we got to get more angry and get more angry guests, and they blew themselves up. And I guess when Capehart says that he thinks that Kamala Harris lost because she was black and female, I guess he thinks that Joe Biden was what? I don't know. Was he going to win or lose? Because Joe Biden would have lost as much as I think Kamala Harris, and he was a white male. So I don't know what his point is. It's silly. Nobody in that party was going to win, no matter what color or gender there was, given that the key issues that they were trying to articulate to the American people were polling about 20 or 30% support across the board.
Mm-hmm. Right. Here's now what they've done, because this won't be over for MSNBC. I've told the story before about when I went into the 9 a.m. slot on NBC, replacing Tamron Hall. The National Association of Black Journalists wrote a letter to NBC saying, you're racist because you replaced a black woman with a white woman. And like NBC called them to say, what are you talking about? This is ridiculous. We have lots of black hosts up and down the lineup. And they admitted they were doing a favor, that they got asked, this was a favor, and I know who called it in, to complain on behalf of this black host. So now what they've done in their primetime lineup over at MSNBC is they've replaced, out of their 4 primetime hosts, 2 were women of color. Alex Wagner is a woman of color. I'm not exactly what her background is, but she's not white. And Joy Reid, of course, is a black woman. And they've replaced 2 out of the 4 with new hosts. In one case, they replaced Joy Reid with 2 black people and a Hispanic woman. And in the case of Alex Wagner, they put in a white woman. Jen Psaki is in replacing her. I'm not sure what they're going to, I mean, it's one thing to have Rachel Maddow there. That's the white woman they can all tolerate. Psaki's new to the game. Of course, I don't really call her Jen Psaki because whenever I hear her talk, I can only see and hear this.
To dance the kitty cat dance, we need to scratch our kitty paws, stomp our feet, and wag our kitty tails. We got the mermaid free! Yay!
That's how she talks. I'm sorry, but it is. So she's going to be taking over there, and there will be racial blowback on MSNBC. It's happening. I guarantee you by this time tomorrow, we'll have some sort of a letter, protest, fiery something. It's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't want to advise, anybody in the left-wing black movement, but if you look at this multiracial democracy that they keep talking about, we have now people from India, if we call them Asians in the same breath as we do people from China or Japan, they're up to about 15% of the population. We have about 15% of Hispanics. We have we don't hear from those same groups that they're going to protest. Sometimes we do, but I think what we're watching is that this is getting very tiring because we're a multiracial society now, and it's not just a white-black binary of the 1960s, and they haven't caught up to that. And they should look at these other groups, because these other groups do have extremists that are demanding these entitlements and set-asides and quotas, but most of the people are just ignoring it, and they're going out in the workplace, and they're competing, and they're doing very well. And parity. I think there's 16 ethnic groups that are not white that have a higher per capita income than so-called whites, whether it's Arab Americans or whether it's, Taiwanese or Japanese Americans or people from India. And that's the model that the country's moving to. And this idea that the black leadership, and a lot of the black average rank and file understand that, and that's why Donald Trump is picking. You've heard so many black people say,
except on MSNBC, you heard Wajahat Ali. Like we had Nimrata, meaning Nikki Haley, and we have who was the other Indian he named, an Indian American. Everybody's got to be in their group and be reminded that the evil Republicans will never really want you. They don't really want you, Nikki Haley. Yeah. They don't really want you, Vivek. They don't really want you, Byron Donalds. Your skin color is everything to them. Of course, this is projection. This is how the Democrats see it all. But let me just give you a couple of other examples, Victor, because it's amazing. You look at the people who are going, and I'm sure in 6 months we'll be doing a montage of the people who came in, and they're probably going to sound a lot like the people who left. But in any event, this Alex Wagner, she was doing 4 days in Rachel Maddow's slot, and Rachel was doing Mondays. And by the way, so the only two people remaining from those four are two white guys. They got the two white guys, Chris Hayes and Lawrence O'Donnell, survived. Yeah. They lived to fight another day. Okay. But Alex Wagner had to go. Look, in MSNBC's defense, she was totally talentless. She was pretty. And she was pretty. I'm sorry. This was like the list of her accomplishments. And left wing, which I guess somebody at MSNBC thought, okay, that'll do it. This is just a sample of Alex Wagner's kind of commentary. This is her during the DNC. Let's start with SOT 7.
J.D. Vance lecturing everybody on, what a family means, what it means to be a man. Donald Trump obviously has his own version of manhood. To see Tim Walz out there as a man who is just joyfully embracing his role, talking about struggles with infertility. It takes two partners to get pregnant. And for way too long, this conversation has been relegated to women or the carriers of pregnancy.
The carriers of pregnancy. She caught herself for saying women and corrected it. I'll give you one more, Victor. Here she is talking about J.D. Vance after the Republican National Convention, SOT 6.
But I do think there were some sort of Easter eggs of white nationalism in the speech. One of the long sort of a paragraph, at least, about this plot in Eastern Kentucky where his 7 or 6 generations of his family are buried. And his hope is that his wife and he are eventually laid to rest there and their kids follow them. The white male lineage that that defines the family history, that branch of the tree supersedes all else. And I just think the construction of this notion reveals a lot about someone who fundamentally believes in the supremacy of whiteness and masculinity. And it's couched in a sort of halcyon, revisitation of his roots, but it is actually really revealing about what he thinks matters.
This was after the RNC, Victor, where he had been introduced by his brown wife, Usha Vance, with whom he's made 3 children, proving he's not really all that obsessed with his white lineage going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when she talked about the masculinity of Tim Walz and in vitro, he lied about in vitro fertilization. That was he was a complete pathological liar. And then if he's going to be so macho, he lied. He just kept spinning lie after lie after lie about his military rank, service, conditions about going to Iraq. So he was a he was a forced detractor on that ticket. And I'm talking as a white man about another white man. That white male he took votes away from a black female. He was so mediocre. He could not tell the truth. He was herky jerky. He got on stage. He just looked like he was insane. He kept waving his arms and screaming and yelling. He was a buffoon.
Always looked like he was being attacked by bees.
He did. He really, that's a good picture because that's exactly what happened to him. And the idea that he was a model of masculinity was a joke. Everything that she says is just not true. And that ultimately a person has to tell the truth, at least as they see the truth. But all these people just get up there and they lie and they don't even believe what they're saying because it's so obviously
that's the thing. So I wonder whether she went more left wing with that lunacy, because when she first started out, she had nothing other than probably a natural leftist bent and her good looks and an obvious inability to manage her surroundings. Now, this is another thing. Keith Olbermann talked about this on his podcast at one point, because I remember we ran the soundbite. He was talking about how he says he got Alex Wagner a job at MSNBC, but the problem was she could not read prompter, or they wanted him to use her more, but she could not read prompter. So we actually looked into it, and lo and behold, the man was right. Here's Sod 8.
Tonight, the FBI warrant used to search Mar-a-Lago is unsealed. The 3 potential crimes laid out in that document. We'll dive into what it means and what could happen with one of the Wall Street Journal reporters who was first to report on the contents of that warrant. Then
She's panicking.
Then we'll talk with...
Oh, God.
We are actually going to go right to the top story.
Oh, my God. If you're just listening to this, you have to look up on the youtube.com/Megyn Kelly, 38 minutes into the show, and watch her meltdown. Clearly, there's a prompter issue. We all have them at times. You navigate through it, and you try not to let the audience know by mouthing, "What? Go?" and moving your arms around, because you always know you are on camera when the red light is on. Just a little fun walk down memory lane. There wasn't a lot to choose from there, Victor.
Well, in her defense, the President of the United States would actually read the prompts on the telephone.
It's a leftist thing.
Period. He actually said things like that. So she's doing a better job than the president did. And that's the lowest bar you can imagine.
She's out the door, at least from the show. Joy Reid's out the door. Jonathan Capehart, say goodbye to your show. Jen Psaki moving up in the world. But here's the bottom line. It's a bloodbath at MSNBC. And the reason is, yes, they went too far left. I mean, not too far left, but just too far loon. They went too far loon. And the other reason is these ratings. These numbers that I was reading to you just a moment ago. These are horrid. These are truly horrid numbers. The overall is terrible too. The overall, okay, in the 700s. Rachel Maddow gets 1.8 million in the night she's in. That's respectable. That's a good number. I mean, Hannity gets 3 million. So, but I'm just saying she's not at a laughable number. And everybody else is a joke. And that's in the overall. In the demo, all these numbers will get you fired all day long. 59, 65, 144, 103, 88. That was their primetime lineup on Thursday. So they understand their business model requires an overhaul in order for them to remain on the air. I'll just give you one other thing, okay? Now they're pinning their hopes on Jen Psaki. Jen Psaki, Dora, who is, I'm sorry, but this is not a talented broadcaster. She wasn't a talented White House spokesperson, and she's not a talented broadcaster. And unlike a lot of people, like Mark Thiessen, who I found with his little clipboard, and at the beginning he was really nerdy and sweet, but slightly stiff, who had huge potential and has since realized it. She does not have huge potential. Trust me, I have an eye for this stuff. This stuff I really do know. She does not have huge potential. She's already gone as far as she's going to go in terms of delivery. But here is what they found worthy of boosting to the main 9 p.m. Rachel Maddow slot, at least on the 4 nights a week Maddow's not there, slot 11.
this magical, charismatic quality in person. That was fierce and fearless.
She is in my view, an undervalued talent. She's a very fierce communicator. That's who she is, but there is a character out there. It's almost like public opinion hasn't caught up with what she is doing out there. And also, we live in a country that is sexist and racist.
Okay, great. You're on board with the right messaging.
Yeah, that goes right to the heart of why the Democratic Party is failing, because anytime things do not go well for them because of their own incompetence or stupidity, or they're on the wrong side of the issue, they have a choice whether to be introspective and self-critical and adopt, or blame it on sexism and racism. And they always take the latter. They always do. She was one of the worst press secretaries, because every time that they asked her a question that was not just a softball, she was like a deer in the headlights, and she said, I'm going to circle back on that. And they finally called her Circle Back Saki, or whatever. They made fun of her. That's all she said. I'm going to circle back on that. I'll circle back on that. I'll circle back.
That's right.
She never had an answer. She was a mediocrity. It's kind of sad, because, there are so many brilliant African-American people out there, and I know that they're a left wing, but if they would get somebody like the economist Roland Fryer at Harvard, who's a public intellectual, or Glenn Loury, just put them on there for 5 minutes and say, we don't want to have you talk about politics. Just explain inflation to the people. Just explain, the electoral cost. They would be so brilliant, and it would change the whole atmosphere, and everybody would just say, wow. It would have the exact opposite effect. Then they keep talking about Kentucky Fried Chicken, and they don't understand that they are submitting a stereotype of mediocrity because of their ideology. But if they really want to help Black people and make Black incidental, not essential to who we are, there's so many Black people out there who are brilliant.
They don't want
and they
that,
don't even, and they don't want it. They don't identify by Black. But if you put them on, and people would see that A, they're brilliant, and two, they could care less about what color they are and just listen to what they say.
These left-wing channels like MS and CNN too, for that matter,
I know it.
They don't want race to be anything other than essential. They refuse. Like those of us who've been trying to make it less essential and follow the MLK, I see a friend, I don't see a Black friend. They object to it. They say, now you're a racist if you feel that way. So they don't want to hear from a Glenn Loury, because he doesn't look at himself like that. Doesn't look at us like that.
But when you say I think what you mean is mostly white, wealthy elites that feel that they're left wing, and they want to have these tribal constituencies.
Them too. I'm at MSNBC, but yes, them as well.
But who's running MSNBC? I think, what's her name? Rashid, what's her name, ran it. But mostly it's a condescending, elite, liberal white person who has this image of Blacks that they can't really be free thinkers, and they're going to have to toe their line, and they owe it to them. And that's why you get all this anger from very wealthy white people in the Democratic Party. Right after the election, they were saying things like, I wish we should close those borders. Those people are, they don't know all we did for them, the Hispanic community. They were disloyal. They kept saying disloyal. They have a very condescending attitude. And that's the problem, is that they hire Black people that mouth the shibboleths that they say, and they don't want to draw into the rich talent, the pool of talent that African Americans offer. And at least, in some conservative outlets, you'll get a lot of African American people, and they'll say whatever they want. Sometimes it's not always MAGA, but people let them on. And that's what they need to do if they're going to reclaim their name. But if they keep doing this, they're really not just racially divisive, but it's hurting Black people, because they are getting the least talented people, which wouldn't matter if you didn't bring in race, but they're doing the worst of two worlds. They're bringing in very untalented or very limited talented people, and then they're accentuating their race as if they're connected. And so when people look at that or turn it in, they say, this person is crazy and he's Black. Whereas if they have a choice, they can either get a very talented Black person and then talk about being Black, or they can just say that this person is not very talented and we don't really care whether he's Black or white. But they don't do that.
Right.
They say this person is Black, and he's
mediocre. We would not normally say like, she's getting replaced by two Black people and a Hispanic person, but that's how they count everything. And full well, if Joy Reid were replaced by a white woman, there would be a full-on meltdown at MSNBC. By the way, there still might be. Like I say, there's going to be blowback in the next 24, 48. But there's now a report that they've offered Joy Reid to come in tonight to do a final show. But just as I was coming to air, maybe this has since been resolved since, 46 minutes ago, that they couldn't find Joy Reid. They hadn't heard from her, and they were still unclear on whether she would be showing up to do the last show and what else does she have planned? Like, who knows? So I don't know about you, but tonight I will be. When does that show air? What time is that show on, Steve? It's on at, well, it must be 7 p.m. Okay, 7 p.m. because I have the ratings here. So 7 p.m. I know what I'm doing tonight.
But don't you think they're in a jam? What would you? She's gonna go on the air and blast them and say they're racist, and they
it's
know
very
that.
Dumb of them to allow it. They should just. I mean, if I were running MSNBC, I'd say you fired, and here's the door. Thanks for your service. And the next person on 7 will say, Joy's gone.
If I was running NBC and this was her last show, I'd say, I can't find her. I've looked everywhere and she hasn't reported in. That's what I'd say, just what they said.
I must have caught in her spam filter. I don't know.
Yes. I have a feeling she's home. I have a feeling she's home and she is glued to her phone and no one's called her. And they keep saying, I can't find her. Where is she? And
you know what? She's probably having her agent call NBC News right now, because the news also hit today that Lester Holt is stepping down from his evening slot. She's probably thinking she's in the running. Joy, you're not. No, sorry, sweetheart, you're not. By the way, on the Lester Holt thing, it is interesting. He's stepping down. NBC Evening News, Nightly News, has been losing to ABC with David Muir, unbelievably,
oh my God,
for some time now by a couple of million. So that's not good for NBC, but they have nobody who's going to take on Muir. I wonder who it'll be. I don't really care because those shows are pretty irrelevant. But anyway, that happened. This just out from the New York Post. Canned MSNBC anchor Joy Reid was spotted wearing a fur-like coat and green baseball cap as she ducked out of her $1 million Maryland home in exclusive photos taken by the Post shortly after the rabid anti-Trump host was ousted by the embattled network. All right, so she was seen, but we don't know whether she will be seen tonight at 7 o'clock on MSNBC. There's drama. We'll wait and find out more. It's a pleasure talking to VDH today. When we come back, we'll get to actual news as opposed to just the stuff that makes us happy. All right. Don't go anywhere. Victor, thank you. We'll be right back. As President Trump begins his new administration, one of the top Democrats in Congress aiming to undermine the Trump agenda is Senator Dick Durbin. And according to our sponsor, the Electronic Payments Coalition, Senator Durbin has a new scheme, a government takeover of your credit card. Today, Americans have thousands of choices in credit cards, but they say Senator Durbin's plan will result in less competition and less security. And that means more risk to your credit and your identity. Learn more at guardyourcard.org and consider telling your senators to stop Dick Durbin's government takeover of your credit card before it's too late. So Elon Musk once again sent federal workers and their media supporters into a tailspin this weekend by sending out via the Doge team an email saying, please name 5 things that you've worked on this week. And it was not well received, I think it's fair to say. Cue 10,000 articles about how inappropriate he is and what an offense this was. I'll give you just one example. New York Democratic Senator Andy Kim. To our public servants, I'm sorry you're being threatened. You deserve so much better. I remember how proud I was when I first swore my oath as a civil servant, honor of a lifetime. Remember why you chose to serve. Stay strong. I and many others will be right by your side. Somebody on X responded, don't you think you're being a little bit dramatic? I could easily respond to this email from my employer. I actually do go to my job and work. They're freaked out that his email was, what did you do last week? And he told them to summarize their accomplishments. On X, he said failure to respond would be taken as a resignation. He did not say that in the actual email, but I'm not sure I'm so sorry for your loss, the honor of your job having been removed, Victor.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way to enforce it, but I think he wanted to draw attention to how outraged they would get and then contrast it with what everybody puts up with every day. Even at a think tank where I work, when I heard this, almost simultaneously, I got an email and it said, "This is time for your annual review, Victor. Would you please list all the things that you have done and for the entire year, day by day?" And we do that every year. Everybody does that. And sometimes they do it by the month, sometimes they do it by the week. But the idea that you don't have to do that. So when they got this outrage, I think it's sort of trolling them. And yeah, I think it really helped Kash Patel because he said, well, we're not going to do it at the FBI because I protect the rank and file and they report to me. And that was kind of the criticism that the left
You have
was
now
making.
said that. So just so we're clear, but Kash said that you don't have to do it at the FBI. Pete said that at Defense. You don't have to do it here. Tulsi just said that over the intelligence agency. You don't have to do that here. And of course, the judiciary, there was a mass email sent out to judges and judges' staff, who that's appropriate. The Article 3 branch does not have to respond to edicts coming from the presidency, from Article 2. So it's fine that they did that and at the judiciary. But yeah, you've got a bunch of people within the executive branch saying no.
Yeah, I think that was good because it shows there's disagreement that Elon's got good ideas, but everybody's not following them. And these cabinet people and agency heads protect their own. And that's the kind of message they wanted. And whether he was serious in the beginning, I'm not sure, but it didn't hurt him at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, honestly, you would think it was like, he was like, come submit your DNA, saliva, and blood. And it was like, he asked what you did this week. What are 5 things you accomplished this week? They didn't want to answer it. And I'm sure, and Elon said in his defense, what we're finding is that there's so many federal employees who don't even check their email. They don't come to work. They don't check their email. They're out to lunch. They don't come to the office. That's one of the big things that they're trying to do, get them to return to the office because they don't believe they're working. They think they're sitting at home watching their stories on the taxpayer dime. And in a lot of cases, they are. So they can't fill out the list of 5 things.
Yeah, I think what everybody's upset about is that every single day we get plants that shut down or they move offshore or they're redirected or some corporation has an economy. They're on the bottom line. It's all red. So they're cutting. This happens every day to Americans and they don't get any type of coddling like federal employees. But when it happens to federal employees, we're supposed to feel like this is horrible. They're doing this now with the National Park Service in Yosemite and they have an upside down flag. And I thought when I read it, that there must be thousands of layoffs. I think it was 10 people out of, I don't know, it was 1,200 or something. 10 people were found not to be essential. So this cycle drama that all these federal employees have, and most studies show they're making 30 to 40% more than people in the private sector. And you think the private sector would make more because they don't have job security and they take greater risk, but that's not true. And so I think, again, it's going to boomerang, maybe not in the short term, but when people start to see these employees who are better paid than they are and they have more job security and they're screaming and yelling about not wanting to do what the people in the private sector have to do almost every week, month, and year, it's not going to work. And I think that might be one of the reasons that Elon Musk did it.
Yeah, to be accountable. That's what I expect of my staff. That's what's always expected of me when I had a boss. And that's absolutely what we expect of our federal workers. Now, on the topic of accountability, this is actually really interesting. Dan Bongino was offered and accepted the position as number 2 at the FBI under Kash Patel, Deputy Director of the FBI. Dan Bongino, one of the greatest guys in America, who is former NYPD, former Secret Service, who has been like on the pointy edge of the spear on calling down the BS attacks on Trump and with respect to the investigations against him and all that stuff for a long time now. To me, I'm amazed he took it because even though we absolutely could use him and he's definitely qualified, notwithstanding the fact that he hasn't been at the FBI, all the panties are in a bunch over there reportedly at the FBI. He's not one of us. Yes, exactly. Right. That's why he got the offer. But I can't believe he took it. I guarantee you he's making millions of dollars doing that podcast. It was very successful. And so good for him. You know, it's a self-sacrifice. He's definitely very close with Trump. He's had a religious reconnection or awakening post his significant cancer experience, which, I mean, he almost lost his life. And I'll bet anything he really felt called. So he's going over there. But I wanted to show you this. Some savvy Twitter user, do we have it? Yeah. Found this soundbite of Dan in his last show on Friday. And I think he's doing a show today, so we'll hear more today, I think. and listen to this soundbite in lieu of what we now know.
Folks, I strongly encourage you to go back and take another look today at the Russia collusion hoax. We had the FBI, in conjunction with the Department of Justice, officials in Congress, foreign governments, and intel people, fabricate a story, invent a story that could have caused and done serious long-term harm to international relations with a nuclear-powered foe. It's kind of a big freaking deal. I'm not letting it go. And you listen to me. This is going to be very important in the coming days. I'm not letting this go. I want to find out what happened, because it can never happen again. Not to a Democrat, not to a Republican, not to a Libertarian, not to any United States citizen. You don't get to do that. Why do I bring that up now? Because who is the ringmaster of that circus? Yes, Adam Schiff. And no, I'm not letting it go.
Adam Schiff. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, Adam Schiff lied, and he may have lied under oath when we had the first impeachment, when Alexander Vindman broke protocol and disclosed a classified, or at least a maybe top secret call, and he called the so-called whistleblower Eric Ciaramella and said that Donald Trump was trying to leverage congressionally approved aid for quid pro quo investigation of the Biden family. They went to Adam Schiff and they talked to Adam Schiff and they strategized with Adam Schiff how to impeach Donald Trump. And then Adam Schiff said that that didn't happen, that he had never discussed anything about impeachment with, and that was a complete and outright lie. He has a very good point, Megan, when he says that we've always looked at this as in the realm of abuse of the FBI. And I would add to that, they had the Hunter Biden laptop for 1 year, and they knew it was authentic, and they knew it was authentic when Clapper and Brennan and Michael Hayden and Mike Morrell were lying to the country on the eve of an election that this was a product of Russian disinformation. And any time the FBI could have come forward and told the truth, but they couldn't, because they were also working with Twitter and Facebook to suppress the New York Post stories. And so when you look at Robert Mueller, who said under oath that he did not know what the Fusion GPS conglomerate was. He did not know what the Steele dossier, the two catalysts for his own appointment. And then you look at the next one, James Comey, who pled amnesia 245 times under oath to the House Intelligence Committee, and then also memorialized a classified talk with the President of the United States, confidential, and then leaked it to the New York Times. And then you look at the next one, Andrew McCabe, the interim FBI, and he lied 4 times, according to Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General. 4 times he lied to federal investigators. And then we get Christopher Wray, and we see that he would not tell us whether there were any informants. There turned out to be, I think, 26 on January 6th. We had the whole school board mess, going after traditional Catholics, going after that. That is what Dan Bongino's talking about. This was an utterly corrupt hierarchy. And I think he's a wonderful person to go in. But he made a really good point when he said this had foreign policy ramifications, because the worst thing we've been doing with Putin is we have appeased him in some cases, but then we've demonized him. Not that he didn't deserve it, but when you tell Putin, well, I'll react if it's a major or minor invasion, or you say, I told Vladimir to knock off the cyber attacks on hospitals, or maybe I'll fly Zelensky out, but at the same time you're appeasing him, and that was from Obama administration. You're calling him a murderer or a killer, and then you're creating this whole idea that the Russians threw the election to Trump. It was a complete lie. You can see that we could have had a more realistic relationship with Russia and balanced them off against China well before these. And so he's right. There were foreign policy ramifications. You didn't need to lie about Vladimir Putin. He was bad enough, but they kept lying and lying and lying. And these were the same people during the Obama administration that appeased him with the reset, Hillary and the red button, and the hot mic and soul with Barack Obama, give me space and I'll be flexible, all that stuff. And yet they did really damage to a workable relationship with this.
Well, I mean, this could be accountability day for Adam Schiff, because what's interesting about the Bongino comment is it's about what you're talking about, Russiagate and so on. What Adam Schiff got the preemptive pardon from Biden for was his work on the J6 committee. That was all J6 stuff. He did not get a preemptive pardon for everything. And so I do wonder what Bongino exactly will or possibly push for once he gets in there. Like that, Adam Schiff may be exposed on. A lot of that stuff, let's say hypothetically you decided he should be charged with, let's take one of the Democrats' favorite charges, seditious conspiracy, where you work to overthrow your government or your president, right? You could, maybe that's what they're going to try. I have no idea. But I just looked it up. That's got a 5-year statute of limitations. So we're beyond that now. We're pretty beyond that, right? I mean, I guess it depends. Maybe not. Maybe not. Because if you look at the full Russiagate allegations and how long they took to play out, I have to go back and look at the date of the Mueller report. Anyway, you're going to have some statute of limitations problems, but the FBI could certainly make your life unpleasant while they investigate such a thing if there's any sort of colorable claim that we're still in time. And if you were a Democrat, Victor, you would say, let's do that because, putting the person through the process and having their name dragged through the mud every day in the papers is the point.
And he's going to look at why the House voted to censor Adam Schiff, and they did censor him. And the reason they did is they said that he lied repeatedly about his involvement with the whistleblower, and he repeated the lie serially, especially in the House Minority Report. When the Nunes memo went out, and Kash Patel was the main architect of that memo, and they damned it and said it was a complete, it turned out that almost everything in that memo was accurate. And then when Schiff made a minority memo, almost everything in that memo was false. And he knew it was false, and yet he promulgated that. So I don't know if he's legally culpable, but he did a lot of damage, and maybe Bongino can bring light and remind people about that, because it did have a bearing on foreign policy. And it really was bad because Donald Trump, while all this was happening, Megan, he killed the Wagner group in Syria. He got out of an asymmetrical missile deal. He was the first person to send offensive weapons to Ukraine that Biden would later put a hold on, and earlier Obama had put a hold on. He flooded the markets with cheap oil. He put sanctions on the oligarchs, and he told the Germans, "Don't do this Nord Stream 2. It's terrible. You're going to be a captive of Putin." So he was the toughest of the last 4 presidents on Putin, but yet these lies from Schiff that he was a asset or a toady, and Clapper and Brennan, it really hurt our relationship, because on the one hand, Putin was thinking, my God, Trump is pretty hard on me, and yet they're saying that I helped Trump. And then we got to remember, of the last 4 administrations, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, there was only one administration where he didn't attack his neighbors. He didn't go into Georgia or Ossetia, or he didn't try to take the Donbass or Crimea, or he didn't try to take Kiev under Donald Trump. And yet Donald Trump we were told that Donald Trump had appeased him. And of course he didn't. He was the only one that deterred him. So the whole thing was really a dark chapter in American diplomatic and political history.
Mm-hmm. I do want to spend a minute with you on Ukraine, but before we get to Ukraine, let's just talk about Germany. So over there in Germany, the sort of more moderate conservative party has won their parliamentary elections, and the more conservative, more to the right, more MAGA-esque party has gotten only 20% of the vote, which is very good for them. It's just they didn't win enough to actually win. And so unfortunately, the moderate Republicans over there, or conservatives, govern with the left in Germany. They're not going to form some coalition with the more MAGA-esque branch of the conservatives. They're going to form a coalition with the more leftist branch, which is unfortunate for our German friends, because that's not what they need. And now already, the likely new German chancellor, Friedrich Merz, who is the leader of this conservative Christian Democratic Union, that's the moderates, gives an interview and says the following: "It's an absolute priority to strengthen Europe as quickly as possible so that we achieve independence from the U.S. step by step. After the latest statements by Donald Trump last week, it is clear that the Americans, in any case, these Americans, this administration, mostly don't care about the fate of Europe one way or another." Also said that intervention from Washington, a reference to Vance and Musk expressing support for AFG, the Alternative for Germany party, that's the more MAGA-esque group, was no less dramatic, and ultimately no less outrageous than the intervention that we've seen from Moscow. What? People close to this guy describe him as direct and pragmatic, says the Washington Post, but also arrogant and thin-skinned. So this does not sound like a friend to the United States. And he's offended by the messaging coming out of the United States, which has really been, do your part, Germany.
Constructive criticism. It says, we want you to live up to your Western obligations to ensure free speech. And it's going to make it much worse, because if you took the AFD's vote and Mertz's vote, it's about 51% of the people, and they should have a conservative government.
Yes.
But he's going to reach out to the Green Party and the Social Democrats, and there's not going to be a conservative voice in Germany, and that's going to make people even angrier after they feel they voted for a conservative majority. And, he better be very careful, Megan, because his country is running about an $80 billion trade surplus. And it's not based anymore on superior German productivity. They have 4 times the energy costs that we do. And they're not as productive as we are anymore. And yet they're having an $80 billion because they charge 5 to 6% tariffs on all our goods. And we charge either none or 1 or 2%. We've got 3 big bases there. We have about 75,000 American soldiers that protect Germany, because of the 32 NATO countries. We asked them 11 years ago, when you just pay a measly 2% of your GDP on military expenditures, 9 of them or 10 of them haven't done that. And Germany hasn't. It's still down 1.5. And everybody looks and says, well, Germany's not doing it, so we don't have to. And then after the Nord Stream 2 dependency, Merkel thought, well, we're going to shut down all the nuclear plants, all the coal plants, all the natural gas of our own, because we don't want to deal with this icky, dirty fossil fuel, but we'll get it from Russia, let them do it, and give it to us cheap. And Trump said that is stupid, because you're going to be dependent on Putin, and he's going to know that. Well, now that they need liquefied natural gas from the United States. So Trump is going to correct that trade surplus with them. And if you told, Germany said tomorrow, we want all of your troops out. We don't want your stupid American protection. We don't want to be under your nuclear umbrella. Get out. Trump would do it. He'd say, okay, if that's your attitude, fine. And he will make the necessary adjustments. So they are very dependent upon us. And they should also think that for 85 years, we fought that country twice. We didn't want to go over there. We never wanted to go over to Europe. We had to go over there in World War I. I'm speaking to someone who, my grandfather was gassed in World War I. My father flew 40 missions in a bomber in World War II. The person I'm named after was killed in World War II. None of us wanted to go over there, our country. We went over there and saved Europe twice. And then we did it a third time. We protected a vulnerable Germany from Russia for almost a half century in the Cold War. And they took that free defense and they had the German miracle. That was great. They were spending all of their resources on being productive, but they developed a very harsh strain of anti-Americanism. And I don't know where it came from, but I have my suspicions that it had something to do with the humiliation of defeat, and then dependency on the United States. And if he really thinks that Donald Trump is some crazy person with no constituency, he should look at the polls, because
right, he speaks for us now. I
Donald
want to get into
Trump
Ukraine too, but let me
American.
finish up domestically before I take us fully across the pond there. Trump in an epic battle of words, and now in the courts with the Maine governor. It was a thing of beauty when at the governor's meeting at the White House on Friday, he called her out to her face on her defiance of his executive orders around gender and boys trying to play in girls' sports. Watch this.
The NCAA has complied immediately, by the way. That's good. But I understand Maine. Is Maine here, the governor of Maine? Well, are you not going to comply with that?
I'm complying with the state and federal laws.
We are the federal law. Well, you better do it. You better do it, because you're not going to get any federal funding at all if you don't. And by the way, your population, even though it's somewhat liberal, although I did very well there, your population doesn't want men playing in women's sports. So you better comply, because otherwise you're not getting any federal funding. Every state, good. I'll see you in court. I look forward to that. That should be a real easy one. And enjoy your life after governor, because I don't think you'll be in elected politics.
It's Perfect. Perfectly done. Trump, thank you so much. So thrilled he won. Okay, that woman is Janet Mills. And I just want to say this. She's a far lefty on this issue, and she's not in step with the people. He's absolutely right. But let me just tell you something. An executive order does have the force of federal law. It does have the force of federal law. And under the Supremacy Clause, federal law trumps state law when they conflict. State law reigns if there's no federal law. But if there is a federal law and then there's a competing state law, and they conflict, federal law trumps state law. So Trump is absolutely right in his constitutional interpretation there. And an executive order has the full force and effect of law. The only way of getting out of an executive order is if you can prove that the president did not have the authority to enact it in the first place. You know, that he just acting willy-nilly and there's nothing in the Constitution that gave him the power to issue such a thing. That's not going to be the case here. Title IX is a legitimate, duly enacted statute that the executive branch and the Department of Education has been interpreting since it was passed. And he said to her, Title IX must be complied with. Title IX, Biden's changes to it, allowing boys to compete, has been struck down. That is no longer of any valid force or effect, and all the courts will so hold. What's in effect right now is a title that protects girls, biological girls, in sport. And the Department of Education, which now is Trump's, has interpreted Title IX to say boys may not play. And so he's 100% in the right legally. If he says you will not let boys play because Title IX doesn't allow it, it doesn't matter what her state civil rights law says. We already saw a very similar battle to this play out, Victor, in 303 Creative, where we had Colorado go in there and say our state human rights laws do not allow this woman to say she won't create a wedding website for people who are LGBTQ. And she went in and said, okay, I see that's what the state human rights law says, but the federal Constitution protects my right of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom not to say or endorse certain things. And that's right there, the same amendment that governs press and so on. And so the court said, right, the Constitution will trump this particular protection under the state law. That's what happened. That's what's going to happen in Maine. She knows it. She's looking to make herself a star. And she is, because if you Google her name and Trump today, you will see about 24 fawning profiles on the woman who stood up to Trump.
Short-sighted, because that issue, I know that Maine is a liberal state, but that issue runs 70 to 80% against her on almost every poll. People overwhelmingly, I think it's only 20 to 30% of the people would like to see or like to allow biological males in female sports. It's a no-brainer.
20%
and
at most.
Yeah, and then the second thing, NCAA has already ruled against her. So what is she saying? That it's okay to do it, but all my athletes and all my state universities and colleges and JCs, they're not going to be able to, if you're a biological man, you're not going to be recognized in an NCAA event. And so she's not going to be able to affect that. And that makes no sense at all. And then Maine, like all small states, are very dependent on federal funds. And we're already seeing these statutes now about sanctuary cities that Trump is going to try to make the same case. We have 600 of them. If they violate federal immigration law and they think this neo-Confederate idea of nullification, that's what she is a neo-Confederate. Like South Carolina, I'm not going to follow the tariff law. Or these are the same things that started the Civil War in the South, that the South said we're not going to honor Civil War. This is what George Wallace did in 1962 when he said, I'm not going to follow federal integration civil rights laws at the University of Alabama, and I'm not going to segregate it. It's got a bad tradition, states' rights, of nullifying federal law. And so in every aspect, she's on the losing end. So I think you've come up with the only explanation, that she feels that she wants to be some kind of cultural icon or get all this publicity, but it's short-sighted.
Mm-hmm. How about Trump and the guts to call her out and engage in that battle? There won't be 24 profiles of Trump and how tough he is, right? Has no qualms. A lot of men especially would not want to take on the female governor, get right up in her face like that. Not Trump. He does not give a fig.
Not about him. He doesn't care. And there's 40% of the country that likes him because he doesn't care. And the other people if he picks out his fights when he says he doesn't care, like this one, the other 15% that are critical, you'll get 55% ratings on this issue because of the issue.
Yeah.
She's on the wrong side of this issue, and she knows it. It's a very feminist issue.
So she wants to go down swinging. Meanwhile, in her state, in February 18th, this is, I think, why it was on Trump's mind, a biological boy won first place in the Maine state championship for pole vaulting. The boy, who now goes by the name Katie, had a clearance over the over the vault, 6 inches higher than the girl who came in second. Here's the same boy. Here he was last season, 2 years ago, when he was tying for 5th place in the pole vault. Now that he's a so-called girl, there he is atop the leaderboard and in the number 1 spot, because he's gone from tied for 5th 2 years ago as a boy to winning first by a mile over the girls he towers over, both in the pole vault and on those podiums where they accept their medals. It's ridiculous, Victor. And this is what she's standing up for. Katie, who's actually a boy, that's who she's standing up. She doesn't give 2 shits about the women who are down in 2nd and 3rd place there, who worked their whole middle school, high school, elementary school to try to get as high as they could in pole vault and were doing great. And that 2nd place finisher who would have had gold had it not been for her defiance of the Trump EO.
And that when you look at the statistics in the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, 1990s about what was then called transsexuals and then later transgender, it usually is something like 0.01, 0.02 of the population suffer from biological gender dysphoria. And only this publicity and this left-wing hype has created this minuscule group of people who have a clear biological problem of dysphoria. They made it into a civil rights that became a cause celeb. And so now you have undergraduates at elite schools say that maybe 10, 15% of them want to transition. But it's not based on the actual biological problem, which is very rare in society. And she knows that. And so I don't know why these politicians do that. But when you look at the issue and you poll, especially among minority voters, it polls very poorly. And there, I think she was the same mayor that went to this LGBTQ event and started gyrating on stage and dancing.
Yes.
So I don't think she's a very stable governor at all.
I agree. She made a fool of herself. She, this year, per the Portland Press Herald, Maine K through 12 schools received $250 million in federal funding this school year, which is more than virtually any other school. Maine is especially dependent on the feds for its education money. $250 million. And she is going to lose it unless she gets into line. And like every other politician, when she realizes that money's on the line, which means her job, she will be fired by the Maine residents if she loses $250 million in federal funding, she'll bend the knee. And I can't wait to watch her bend it. I don't care whether a court has to tell her she has to do it or she just learns the hard way when she loses her money, because the Trump Department of Education has just notified her of that there's an investigation now. This is the quote, Maine would have you believe that it has no choice in how it treats women and girls in athletics. Let me be clear. If Maine wants to continue to receive federal funds from the Education Department, it must follow Title IX, or we will do everything in our power to ensure taxpayers are not funding blatant civil rights violators. She could be in trouble with them. She could be in trouble with DOJ. She's definitely going to get sued, and she's going to lose. And good. Let her serve as a lesson, Victor, for the others who are dangerously flirting with this same line.
It's the first Trump administration where he had people throughout the cabinet, Rex Tillerson, James Mattis, John Bolton, that were not MAGA people. And they were in the second tier, they were everywhere. So every time he issued an executive order, you would find somebody like Anonymous that was leaking or bragging that there was a whole army of obstructionists in the federal bureaucracy, and they were all courted and feeded by the media. There's nobody like that now. When he's bringing these people in, one of the first questions I know from a fact is, are you going to stick to the agenda? Have you stuck to the agenda in the past? So she's not going to find dissidents anywhere in the Trump administration, the 20,000 or 30,000 political appointments that are going to try to undermine this. In fact, all of these cabinet people are very different than the first administration. They're going to be force multipliers. It's more likely they're going to say to Trump, well, I think I can even do this and more and more. I can even do more than you suggested. Whereas before it was, yes, Mr. Trump, we'll do it. And then leak to the New York Times, hey, I'm really brave. I'm trying to obfuscate or countermine. It's not the same world as 2017, 18. I don't think she understands it, that there's some very talented people that are working for Trump and they believe in what he's trying to do. And they're very capable and they're very serious. And they're
they've learned
you're
how to
absolutely
fight these.
right what's going to happen to her.
I mean, she used to be a federal prosecutor or a state prosecutor. She shouldn't have forgotten the law. It hasn't been that long ago. She knows perfectly well. That's why I believe she's grandstanding to get her name in the paper and to have her girl boss moment. And the left wing press just runs with it. I actually looked through the press today. Did anybody do a fair job of actually explaining there is a supremacy clause that EOs would have supremacy over state law? And the only way out of it is the way I described. No, it's just read the New York Times write up of it. It's, oh, she took him on. Look how tough she is. She's a tough girl. She was a prosecutor. It's ridiculous. What a disservice. And before we go to break, I just want to give you one other example of media malpractice. In somewhat related news, there's a group of San Francisco people who are suing Trump over his executive orders as pertains to gender, DEI, and so on. They think he can't issue these executive orders. So they're going to file a lawsuit and try to challenge him. Fine. Lots of people are doing that. And it'll play out in the courts. But Axios reports on the lawsuit. And here's their headline. San Francisco community groups sue Trump over anti-trans executive orders. President Trump, this is Axios, ran his campaign on an incendiary anti-trans platform. All right. First of all, he never ripped on trans people. He said that he was going to stop them from competing in girls' sports and he was going to declare actual gender realities. If you want to live your life as a man claiming to be a woman, that's your business. And Trump has never said otherwise. President Trump ran his campaign on an incendiary, it's not incendiary, the vast majority of the public is with Trump, anti-trans platform that promoted false claims about the community. Well, I was interested in that because I followed this issue very closely when Trump was running and thereafter. So I clicked on the little link in the Axios report. What were the, quote, false claims about the community that he made? And it's cited back to a 2024 Axios article about Trump's appearance at a barbershop in the Bronx and this exchange. Watch.
Washington, I don't know if you ever noticed this. You go Department of Education. You got half the buildings are Department of Education. I never saw. You don't need any of them. I want one person and a secretary to just make sure they're teaching English. Okay, give it a little English. Okay. I'd say reading, writing, and arithmetic. No transgender, no operations. They take your kid. There are some places, your boy leaves the school, comes back, a girl, okay? Without parental consent. What is that all about? That's when they talk about a threat to democracy, they're a threat.
That is 100% true. It is correct. And they know it. Because this is what Axios wrote at the time. They wrote, they quoted that thing, and then they said, the Trump-Vance campaign pointed to a number of stories about policies that allow students to socially transition in the classroom without informing parents, but none of which supported his claims of operations being conducted in schools. That's not what he said. That he was listing a bunch of stuff, the craziness that's happening out there right now. And then he made the separate point that kids are going to school as boys and they're transing them at school. It is 100% true. Just for kicks, Victor, I pulled just a couple. California mother claims teachers manipulated her daughter to change her gender identity. This is out in California. This mother, Jessica Conan, filed a lawsuit alleging that the school allegedly manipulated her seventh grade daughter to change her gender identity under the guise of their parental secret policy, where teachers could counsel students about gender confusion and assert a new gender identity without notifying parents. This became law in California, that you are allowed to do this. In New York City, in the private and the public schools, it's the policy that the kid can come to school, David. He can say, I'm Denise all day while there, take tests as Denise, be called Denise, then go home, David, again at the end of the day, get a report card for David. The parents have no idea when they go in for parent teacher, they talk about David, have no freaking clue he's a Denise to everyone there. And it's policy That's what Trump's pointing out. And the nerve of Axios, this dishonest hack paper, and their DEI reporter, Shauna Chen, who's focused on race and justice. Her most recent articles are 14 Black Bay Area authors to add to your reading list and 9 ways to celebrate Black history in the Bay Area. For her to call them dishonest is the height of projection.
Here in California, it's even worse because Gavin Newsom went back and begged for federal funds to rebuild Los Angeles. Now we're saying they need, this isn't the price to rebuild Pacific Palisades and other places. It's what they need from the federal government in addition to what they little have. They want $40 billion from Donald Trump in the federal government. He had just had a $50 million fund to sue Donald Trump on this issue and on sanctuary cities. And they have no idea that our whole federal water system that transfers, half of it is run by the federal government, and Donald Trump doesn't have to build new things. He doesn't have to give any money if he doesn't want to Los Angeles. He's trying to help them, and they're trying to sue him on 2 issues that have no public support: illegal immigration and open borders, and then the trans issue. And yet they dig down. And Gavin Newsom started the year off with $76 billion in deficits. He ran this state in the ground. Now he has this Stonehenge, it's right near where I'm talking from, this high-speed rail that we've already blown $15 to $18 billion. The price to finish it is $300 billion. 15 years, we haven't laid a foot of track. And he's broke, and he wants Donald Trump to keep giving him $4 to $5 billion. It's not going to happen. And they don't understand that on all these issues, Megan, the ones that you've talked about in Maine and here in California, they're on the wrong side of public opinion. And the public does not support federal funds for trans stuff, federal funds to go to illegal immigrants. They don't want it. The state governors I don't know what they're doing, but his popularity has gone like this, Newsom. He's down below, way below 50%.
Good. And, that's where he belongs. And I mean, great. I mean, talk about Pyrrhic victory, right? To win a lawsuit like that, which they won't, but to win it over the objections of your entire constituency. I mean, whatever makes you feel good at night. All right, stand by. We're going to take a break. More with VDH after this. I'd love to ask him what he thinks about the whole Ukraine scandal, because he's a true expert on war and our history, and he knows what he's talking about when it comes to this issue in particular. Are rising costs or scaling challenges holding you back? Are you having trouble taking your business to the next level? Financial Yield Solutions, Inc., or FYSI, provides tailored solutions for businesses generating $1 million to $10 million annually. From tax planning, advertising, and retirement strategies to scaling operations, FYSI will help businesses thrive. For those considering selling their business, FYSI guides them through a winning exit strategy with confidence. With $500 billion raised for AI technology under the Trump administration, businesses cannot afford to be left behind. FYSI can even help you explore AI integration to lower costs, enhance efficiency, and increase profits in today's rapidly evolving tech climate. With over 14 years of experience, FYSI specializes in addressing the exact challenges business owners face. Book your free business review today to transform your operations, grow your profits, and secure your future. Visit FYSI.com/Megan or call 1-800-877-4000. Success starts with FYSI. There is a real and growing threat to your home and your equity, and it's called title fraud. Here's how it works. Criminals can forge a single document, file it with the recorder, and just like that, your home's title is stolen. They take out loans against your property, draining your equity, and you would not even know it had happened until it was too late. Here's the really scary part. Credit monitoring will not protect you from any of this. But I want to tell you about Home Title Lock to protect your home and equity. Their exclusive triple lock protection gives you 24/7 monitoring of your home's title, urgent alerts if there are any changes, and a team of experts to help restore your title if fraud happens at no extra cost. The bottom line, your home's your biggest investment. Don't leave it vulnerable. Home Title Lock is offering an exclusive 25% off their protection plans. You just go to HomeTitleLock.com and use the promo code Megan25 to get 25% off your subscription and a free title history report to make sure you're not already a victim. Protect your home and equity today. That's HomeTitleLock.com, promo code Megan25.
What explains his solicitous behavior toward Vladimir Putin, which started a long time before that?
Because he wants to be Vladimir Putin. That explains his solicitous conduct to Putin, to Kim Jong-un, to Erdogan, to Xi.
Governor Chris Christie, formerly governor of New Jersey, saying Trump wants to be Vladimir Putin. Could it be more complex than that? We'll ask VDH. Victor, your thoughts on Trump, the comments about Zelensky, about Ukraine allegedly starting the war, which is not, I believe, at all what he meant. If you listen to Trump in context, he's made very clear he knows who started the war. But in any event, you know what the left-wing media is doing right now to him. He's totally capitulated to Putin. He gave up the game before the negotiations started. He should have held back that Ukraine wasn't going to join NATO. J.D. Vance has been saying, everyone knows that. There's no point in pretending that that's still up in the air as a possible negotiation chip. But how do you evaluate what you've seen over the past 2 weeks on Ukraine?
Well, I think you kind of summed it up pretty well. Donald Trump, as you pointed out, knows that Russia crossed the border, and he said that again to make it clear that when he said started the war, he meant something else other than crossing the border. Donald Trump, as we just said, is the only administration which he has reminded us that Putin did not invade a neighbor. So he knows Putin invades neighbors, but he didn't invade under Trump's term. So he's very sensitive to that. What he was trying to do, though, is say a couple of things, Megan. He was trying to say, this thing has gone on for 3 years. There's probably 1.5 million on both sides, dead, wounded, or missing and captured. There's no real change in the pulse of the battlefield. You're no longer the rock star you were of 2022 when you bravely stopped that Kiev attack. But the world is different now. We're 1.5 million casualties from that. All of the European blowhard promises have not been actualized, and you're dependent right now on the 200 to 300 billion that we give you, and yet you're telling us what you're going to do and what you're not going to do, and yet you haven't won the war, and we've given you 300 million, and you're not going to win the war. And it's never been the position of any administration, not Obama, not my first one, not Biden, to militarily give you the ability to take back the Crimea and the Donbass. It's not going to happen. So let's not play coy about it. We're not going to lie and say this is a bargaining chip. Second, you're armed to the teeth. You're better armed than any other NATO country right now. You're at the point where Putin regrets what he did. And if we can get him back out to where he started from, you will be able to defend yourself. So now he's saying, essentially, I don't care what people say, you're not going to be in NATO. And you know you're not going to be in NATO. Europe knows you're not going to be in NATO. We know you're not going to be in NATO. And Russia. So why the pretense of saying, well, we're going to negotiate about NATO membership, or we're going to negotiate Crimea and Donbass? Nobody believes that. So what's the only real contention to stop this thing? Can Donald Trump somehow get Vladimir Putin back to where he was on February 23rd or close to it when he invaded? And I guess he's going to say, okay, Vladimir, you can tell everybody that you institutionalized what you already had at Crimea and Donbass. You were able to make sure that Zelensky is not in NATO. You have your new anti-American alliance. Good. And then he can say to Zelensky, you were very heroic. You were like the Finns in World War II. You stopped the Russians. You saved your country. You were never going to get back what you lost in 2014. You may not be in NATO, but you're armed, and we're going to have a concession. And we're not neo-imperialist. We're trying to have a business relationship. It's good for you because you will be able to develop your natural resources. It's good for us because we'll get some compensation, and that will be a tripwire with the Russians. So when they see us and our businesses right in your country, they're going to be a little reluctant to take on a nuclear power and try to invade you again. So this is a deal, and we can stop this bloodshed pretty quickly. And the left pretty much, Megan, wants to fight to the last Ukrainian, and they really do feel they're going to bleed Russia white, and then all of a sudden it's going to implode, and they're going to get a left-wing Euro country, and that's not going to happen. It didn't happen with the czars.
Victor,
it didn't
have
happen ever.
45 seconds till we got to go, but can you just put in context the way Trump talks?
Yes, he talks exactly like he did with Panama, Greenland, and Canada. We're going to invade Panama. Oh, okay. China deal canceled. We should buy Greenland. Oh, Denmark's now investing in Greenland and rearming. Oh, Canada, we might make you the 50. Oh, you're spending $1 billion suddenly to patrol your border. So he talks like this and he gets results. And we're back to don't take him literally. Take him, for what it is, art of the deal. Take him seriously because he gets results, but don't take him literally.
That's exactly right. So this freak out over like, he's a dictator. Would you calm down? Let's just watch and see what he actually does. And see whether, if, as Caroline Levitt suggested, he might have Ukraine settled this week, which would be really remarkable. Victor, always a pleasure, my friend. Great to see you.
Thank you, Megan, for having me.
All right. We are back tomorrow with Batya Ungar Sargon and more. We'll see you then.